Start the recording. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Mariam, for your kind message in the chat. I'd also request everybody else to introduce themselves in the chat. You can mention your company just so we have a better idea of who's joined from where. I'm Safia Hussain. I'm a manager at SERB and I look at programs related to inclusion and sustainability. We're very happy to be working with UN Women. This has been a long-standing partnership that we've had, and SERB really promotes the UN WEPs in all our disclosure efforts. And we encourage all companies to sign up through the UN WEPs to allow you to work on gender equality and related targets. This workshop is being held to sort of we're acting as WEPs allies, so everybody can companies can join us and sign up for the UN WEPs. Amy is here from Bangkok to support you on this journey, and we're just helping bridge that connection. As always, our team is available to support in any way possible to help you on your web's journey. And now I'll hand over to Amy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Safia, and PVC. And it's lovely to see some of you introduce yourselves in the chat. I see some very familiar companies and long-standing web signatories. And thanks for the message also, Miriam. Great to see you all here as well. We'll be together for about 90 minutes today. I'll start with a bit of a pulse check and then we'll walk you through kind of using some of your GAT results and then look to how you can work towards an action plan. And I'll introduce some different ways that you can also think about some of the results you might be seeing from your assessment. So I'll go ahead and share screen. And also, we are a small group today too, so at any time, I think you can type in the chat if you do have a question. I know since it's webinar format, you might not be able to open your camera and speak, but you're welcome to, at any point type in the chat if you have a specific question, and I can always stop and address it. So yes, we'll be looking today as part of the WEPs, the Women's Empowerment Principles Journey, moving from assessment to action planning, and also looking at how you can report and track progress. Okay, so we'll start with a very brief pulse check on Menti. Some of you may have been here for the previous webinar, some not. But if you could scan the QR on your screen or go to menti.com and I'll type in the code that you can also use. 82196794. And you can go on your phone or your internet browser. You don't have to use your phone. But okay, I'll go ahead and pop to that screen to see if everyone's in. Let me present that. Okay, great. We already have one answer. Some of this, let's see if it'll go full screen. There it goes. Let me just close my tabs. There we go. Some of you, sorry, might have seen this before in the previous webinar, but I just wanted to get a sense check of people that we have with us. Okay, there's 4 in the Menti. Yeah, how advanced do you feel your organization is overall? Okay, so mixed so far, early stages, some good progress, some very advanced. That's great to hear. I'll go ahead and go on to the next. Okay, 2 more in the middle. Great. Okay, we have 6 on and 2 very advanced. Okay, great. So we might have some companies too. We can do some interesting sharing later, maybe with companies at different stages. Okay, how confident do you feel in your individual capabilities to advance gender equality in your office or organization? Okay, 1 person is 2 are very confident. Great. Yeah, maybe some seasoned sustainability leaders. Okay, fairly confident. Okay, somewhat confident. Okay, good to just see the mix. Okay, great. And that could also be a number of different factors, right? Okay, moving on to the next one. What do you feel are the biggest challenges or barriers currently to making progress on gender equality in your organization or specific office? And just to remember, Menti is all anonymous. So also, yeah, your answers are confidential. But yeah, anything you want to share, the biggest challenges or barriers, and they could be internal or external. And this one's just open-ended answer. Oh, okay. We don't have quite any responses yet. Yeah, okay. Yeah, upper management on board. Mm, Sensitization and bias, that's a huge one we hear. Also, workload division. Sometimes so much is put on the shoulders of the one person, and they're also leading multiple functions within sustainability, potentially, right? Not just gender or inclusion. The nature and technical scarcity of resources in the field. Okay. And the industry doesn't have a feeder line for talent. I know that can also be a really difficult one when it's a particularly male-dominated industry. Organizations' mindset. Yeah, we also hear a lot about that. Okay. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I'll keep us going. So, one question for today. Have you completed the GAT and do you have, sorry, your results in hand? That shouldn't say hand. It should say, do you have the results with you today? Great. Okay, at least one has the results. Okay, two said no. Okay. Good for me to know as we go through the session. I think Okay. Some have completed it but don't have the results. That's okay. We can still work with, yeah, I think we can still do most of the activities today that we're going to do, even if you don't have the results. Okay, I think there's just one more question. Yeah, also just curious to know, do you have a gender action plan? So, a couple different options. No, not sure. One can be we have it, but as part of a broader strategy, maybe on inclusion or non-discrimination. Another is we have a standalone plan, but no specific activities or KPIs yet. And then another one, yes, we have a plan and it has specific targets, timelines. Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay. So maybe most that we say, I see we do have 10 online, but okay, maybe not sure as well. Okay, I think that's our last question before we, yes, move on for now. Okay, I will take us back to the presentation. So what we're going to do today, we'll prime in the next 75 minutes. And also if we need to take a quick break, we can. Feel free to let me know. I'll watch our time when we're about halfway through. We'll be looking at this overall WEPs journey and using kind of three tools today. So one is the GAT or the Gender Gap Analysis tool. The other is the WEPs M&E or Transparency and Accountability Framework. And then the third is the WEPs Action Planning tool. Everyone should have a copy of the action planning tool. Um, I won't do a review of the gender gap analysis tool, the GAT. You can always go back and watch the previous webinar, but we're going to start there. I think even if you haven't taken it, we can still work around and do some of the activities that are in the webinar. But we'll mostly be starting today from the assumption that you've taken the GAT, or at least that you know some of the key kind of areas where you need to improve or you want to take further action in the organization. So these are all kind of UN Women and WEPs resources that you do have access to as a WEP signatory to just help you overall with that journey of knowing where you stand, helping you create the pathway ahead, assessing your progress, tracking progress, and then kind of iterating. So you keep going and deepening and developing, and then maybe moving into deeper areas in the value chain of gender equality. So it's a little bit like a full cycle tool to guide that journey. The gender gap analysis assesses your performance. And just a general reminder, if no one's familiar, the WEPs does span kind of leadership commitment, workplace, marketplace, and community. So it really covers the value chain, thinking of every woman that you potentially impact in your organization. If that's someone working in a tier 3 supply chain, if that's someone in a community, a local community where you operate, someone also buying your product, someone looking at your marketing and advertising. And then also including women who are in your office places, women at the board. So really looking full spectrum at all the different ways your organization impacts gender equality. Um, then looking at our action planning tool that we have, that it's not public yet, but those who are signatories and part of this partnership with PBC, we have access to. I'll walk you through that. And then also looking at how you sustain progress using our transparency and accountability framework to help you report and also see where you stand in a more nuanced way. Okay, so where we're going to start first is using the gap results and starting to think towards a plan of action. I won't go into the action planning tool just yet, but we'll start to think of how you set that up and some of the different considerations if you really want to foster that deeper organizational change. Okay, so for those that have taken the gender gap analysis tool, the GAT, I was curious to hear some of the key takeaways after seeing the analysis and results. Anything you found particularly interesting or surprising, or even potentially anything that you dispute or you think is not relevant. And I think please go ahead and use the chat function for now. I know we are in webinar mode, but if you want to type into the chat, key takeaways after seeing the GAT results. We do also have a worksheet available for you. I think everyone should have a copy of the worksheet. Let me just show you what it looks like if it's also something you want to complete later. But we'll be going through this together at a few points, but I can also input the questions in the chat. But if you do have access to the worksheet, you can input your score overall on the GAT. So just as a reminder too, I know we have some more people joining and some have not yet completed the GAT tool. I'm going to see also if I can pull up a sample GAT on my laptop to show you guys just what it looks like. Yes. The GAT spans those 4 areas of leadership, leadership, workplace, marketplace, and community. And it also looks at different stages of implementing the WEP. So it looks at where your commitment level is into implementation, and then measurement and tracking, and then also transparency. So just a very quick preview for those who aren't familiar. This is a sample results where you basically you can see your progress. It gives you a heat map of where you stand, and then it gives you your specific answers. And it's going to tell you across those different stages where you stand. And it will also give you individually for leadership, workplace, marketplace, and community. It'll show you specifically where you stand. So you can see the areas where you're strongest, which is the green, the areas where you start to have more room for improvement, yellow and orange, and then red would be the areas where you have most room for improvement with the GAT. So this tool, oh, great. Okay, 89, which is quite a high one. That's fabulous. That's great. We know every company as well, too, is at different stages. So there is a score out of 100 you get for the GAT results. I'm going to pop another one up. But we know every company is at a different stage. So if you score, I think this was a sample one, it'll be out of 100. You're ranked as beginner, improver, achiever, and leader. These also come into the action planning tools we'll use later, so just important to know. But we know every company is at a different stage. So this is just a comprehensive questionnaire covering all the different areas across that value chain and seeing where you stand. Does anyone else want to share in the chat anything that they found, surprising in their gut results or key takeaways after seeing the analysis? Okay. Okay. I don't see anything else in the chat for now. That's fine. But yeah, I know some of you may not have your results in hand. But really, if I would encourage everyone on the call to take the GAT, even if you haven't yet, it is a really good comprehensive tool and gives you a really good picture of where you stand and then helps you go to that next step when we use the other tools. Okay, where I'm going to go for maybe the next 10 minutes is looking a little bit deeper into how we look at some of the results. And these are some tools we've been using in a lot of our WEPs work over the past year, kind of looking at design and systems thinking to look at how we're actually approaching the actions that we take within our organizations. So we have these very kind of tangible GAT results, and maybe you know already some specific areas within your company that you need to improve, whether that's women's representation in leadership or maybe workplace policies. Maybe you want to develop more family-friendly workplaces for those with caring responsibilities, or you want to do more to promote training to get more women in the leadership pipeline, whatever it is. There's always different ways to think about it. What I wanted to start with a little bit was just thinking, we know kind of one of the core issues is really gender discrimination and bias that really has an impact for women across their careers. And this is, whatever sector they're working from and also whatever type of workplace. We tend to see this throughout the life cycle. So from recruitment and hiring, we see everything from male-oriented language and jobs, or biases against women who may be having children, certain biases or stereotypes about skills, um, uh, everything through promotion and transfers. There is a phenomenon called the motherhood penalty, which we often see that women, once they have children, are less likely to be promoted. For men, it's actually the opposite. It's an interesting inverse phenomenon. Through training and career development, women do tend to have less access to training opportunities and not seen as career driven. Benefits and payment, things like benefits and pensions are also impacted by gender discrimination and pay gaps, and then also even into separation. And I think kind of encapsulating those, we've heard of sticky floors where some women find it hard to move up the ladder, right, or get from the lower ranks of certain jobs in or entry level into middle and senior management. And then also glass ceilings, where it seems like some women can get so far, but we're still not hitting markers in women's leadership, both in kind of CEO representation, but definitely at board level. We still have a long way to go. What's at the heart of some of this, I think a lot of us are familiar with and know are kind of gender norms and stereotypes, right? Those ideas that we have in our head about what men should do, what women should do, what they're capable of, what's acceptable, which then kind of evolves into the workplace or comes out as discrimination in the workplace that then fosters a lot of these inequalities. So one of the ways I want you to think about as we go through the session today and you think about some of the key areas you want to address is called the iceberg model that comes from kind of systems thinking. I know we're going to be looking at, developing very kind of clear action plans, but it's also really helpful to look at this bigger picture and think of how what is happening in your team, in your organization, and your broader company is also kind of impacting with the broader systems. So you can always just raise your hand if you want. I'm curious to see how many are familiar, or just type yes or no in the chat. How many have seen this before or are familiar with this? The reason they call it the iceberg model is because it's a way of thinking of, what's happening at the top that we can see, but what's happening underneath all of that. So the top are kind of specific events or different things that happen in the workplace. So this could be one person in your workplace is potentially harassed, or this could be, your workplace only has 10%, or, someone was passed up for a leadership position. As you start to look a little bit more the surface, what are the pattern or trends happening, right? Is there overall lack of women leadership or women leaders in the company? Does your overall sector have a lack of women in leadership? So the recurring trends, the cycles or behaviors that emerge over time, they're like events, but viewed over a longer timeline. As we get a little bit deeper, you look at the underlying structures or patterns. I know this is a little bit hard to read, but I'll share the slides. These are the processes, the systems, could also be policies or institutions that we have in place that shape our behaviors and our outcomes. So it could even be an organizational process within your company. It could be how you approach training, mentorship, or even taking leaves. It could also be national laws that are impacting something specific. Or also family patterns and structures, or what's expected to happen at the household could also be considered a structure. And then ultimately, what's beyond that? These are kind of the mental models and the norms that we have at the core. These are the beliefs, the assumptions, the mindsets that are influencing how we make decisions, how we take action. Right? This could be the mental model that women are too emotional to be leaders, right? Or men are more decisive as leaders, right? Or women are naturally better caregivers, so they should always be the ones to take care of the children, right? And men should be breadwinners. These are all of these kind of deeper social norms or mental models. Okay. As we move on, and we're going to do a few activities looking at this, I think it can be helpful also when you're looking at the specific areas you want to address in your action plan or in the actions you create of different employees in the organization and how they may be impacted by these different structures. There is NDE tool. Okay. Someone typed in the chat about an NDE tool. I'm not actually sure what the NDE tool is. If you can write that out, it would be great for me. The NDE tool. Yeah, maybe if you can type it out, I can address that question. But as we start to think about prioritizing issues, think of also diverse employees. How are different employees impacted by the events that are happening? What are the underlying structures, or then also some of the mental models or the norms we have that also might have differentiated impacts, not just for men and women, but for different types of employees in the organization? This is just one other kind of way to think about how a systems thinker also approaches an organizational problem. They'll ask, what could be going on under the surface that I'm not seeing? What are the conditions? Things like workplace expectations, uh, um, staffing issues, budget constraints that are influencing these problems, what issues people or systems are working together to create what we see above the water or the specific events? And are there any ripple effects of what our actions might take that we can see moving forward? Great. I do see someone in the chat said, should we use non-discrimination and equality tool by UN in place of WEPs? I'm not as familiar with that tool, but WEPs is a global framework from UN Women and UN Global Compact. And we have been developing it and leveraging it for the last 15 years. So even if you use other tools, that's totally fine. I think we have just established lots of a suite of resources to help you on the WEPs journey. Okay, I do have some questions thinking of the worksheet. I don't know how many people actually have access to the worksheet. If you can type in the chat. If not, I might share the questions on screen and give everybody maybe just 5 minutes to think through this. So what I wanted everyone to do is, yes, I think Safia, you're messaging maybe a few people. Okay, if everyone has access to the worksheet, please go to it. If not, what I want everyone to do is just take 5 minutes and think of whether or not you've taken the GAT tool, is identify a few key issues you're seeing that are either causing challenges to advancing gender equality within your organization or a specific area you want to address, right? Women in leadership, family-friendly policies, I don't know, recruiting more women into non-traditional jobs or into the sector. Those would be kind of the events that you're seeing. I want you to think of the patterns and trends. What's been happening over time? What are the different trends in this country or in my sector or our specific organization? What are the deeper structures? These could be the company systems in place, even policy or legislation influencing what we're seeing. And then what's the norm or the belief shaping this system? Okay, I hope it makes sense to everyone. And you've got the worksheet in front of you. I think with that, we can take, if everyone can take 5 minutes to think of those things and fill those in the worksheet, we can come back in 5 minutes and maybe a few people can share via chat, if that works. Okay, I see, Safia, a couple people are asking for the worksheet to be shared here. Let me see. Oh, yeah,
I'm trying
okay.
to put it in the chat
Oh,
box, but
okay.
it's really
I
not
think
letting me, so I'm just sending a link. Also, I've emailed you the worksheet, everyone, just before this call. So if you just check those messages, the last email from me contains the worksheet. It's attached to the email. And I'm just trying to get a link that I can share here as well.
great. I'm trying to see too if I can share it in the chat, the Zoom chat. Let me see if I can also.
Okay,
Great.
I've just added a link. If you click on it, you should be able to view and download the worksheet on your end.
Great. Okay. Take a few minutes. I'll also just put back up the picture of the, oops, sorry. Be this one. Oh, or this one. This one can always work too. Okay, maybe we'll wait just 1 or 2 more minutes. I think everyone now has the ability to open your microphone and speak. Thank you, Sophia. But maybe we'll wait just 2 more minutes and then I'll invite some people to share. Okay. Okay. I hope we have a few volunteers. If anybody would like to unmute themselves and share some of the issues that you were thinking of or kind of key events that you're seeing, and then thinking of the trends or the patterns or the underlying mental models. No obligation to share, but if anyone would like to share. Okay. Also, welcome if you want to type in the chat any reflections you have or specific things that you thought of, thinking of your organization, the issues, and then any of those things that you're not seeing. Okay. Okay, I won't make anyone speak. Don't worry, you don't have to. Okay, I'll keep us going. I think we're gonna do an activity after this. Sorry, Sumaya, I saw you raised your hand.
Hi, I'm Sadia. Actually, the DI team is sitting together. So I am in Sumayya's team. So I just wanted to share that different organizations have different challenges. So I work for a utility company. Like for us, because it's a technical organization, so you can say that two-thirds of the organization, even more than two-thirds of the organizations are engineers,
Mm,
and in a country like Pakistan, and I think it's not just Pakistan, it's across the globe, that it's really difficult to find women experienced professionals with the engineering degrees. So this is a big challenge that we face. Like in we cannot compare ourselves with the industries like banking industry or FMCGs, because over there it's easier to find talent
mm,
as compared to industry where you there are very few women who take admissions in the engineering fields, and when they complete their education, most of them don't opt to enter the corporate sector. So there are multiple challenges that organizations face, and we cannot compare each other. We all have to deal with our respective problems.
hmm. Yeah. And do you have, Sumaya, do you have any thoughts of how you would address the systems or the mental models when it comes to finding difficult talent for engineering?
It's not about mental models, it's about what's available in the market. So my
Mm,
organization is ready to hire women engineers, but when we go in the market to look for the talent, then we have job advertisements, we do head hunting, we do,
mm,
and so we use all the methods, but at the end of the day, if the talent is not available, where are you going to get that talent?
mm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's a much maybe longer process, right? Where we would really have to also look at education systems and how we raise children to think of what they might do, right? And getting more women to feel kind of inspired to also enter fields like engineering. Yeah, I think it's a long-term challenge, but we have seen some other companies in different countries successful. But yeah, well noted. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to come in?
Just before we move forward, can I please request those of you who haven't confirmed their names and companies, if you could share that in the chat box. You can also just send them to me directly if you don't want to put them in the group option. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Safia. Okay. Okay, let's move on. So if you did have your GAT results, you could use them, but if not, we're going to do just a bit of an activity before we kind of look at the transparency and accountability framework and an action planning tool. So it doesn't have to be the GAT results, but I want everyone to pick one kind of key issue or one key outcome that you want to see, and we'll think through a bit of an implementation plan together. So this is a bit of an approach to making sure you build a plan of action that's holistic and strategic to really work. Is prioritizing the specific issues. We'll just pick one today, ensuring that you define the measures, targets, and goals, and then implementing within the business. I think these were some of the reflections we heard earlier in the Menti, but we'll talk about them a little bit to also get us thinking before we move on to that action planning tool. So I think as you prioritize issues, right, we'll do just one for the exercise, but in the action planning tool, you have a range of areas you can focus on. It is important, right, to see what are the things that you want to work on right now. What are the context and the key drivers, right? Is it the country, gender norms, company culture, and behaviors? Think also of the obstacles internally or potentially externally that are hindering the achievement of this outcome overall. I think also look at the severity and risk to your business and think of also in terms of lost opportunities as well for productivity, for innovation, diverse thinking, also potentially brand loyalty or new customer markets, new talent that you can potentially tap into if you don't address these issues, right? Especially thinking of attracting new talent or younger generations who may have different expectations about how the workplace should work, or different benefits they might have. Look at your internal capabilities. Someone did comment workload division. Sometimes you have several things you want to do and you just simply don't have the capacity to cover all the areas. Determine your ability to positively influence an issue within the organization and engage internal and external stakeholders. We won't go a lot into that today, but I think having that strategy to find internal champions that you need to ensure that you can get buy-in and you can influence these issues is really important. And also engaging external stakeholders that you might have to ensure that the initiative really kind of has, strong foundations and also that you might be able to carry it further if you have others working with you. When we look to measures, targets, and goals, I think all of this is probably stuff you all know very well, right? Is to be clear on the outcome, measures that you'll achieve them in, and establish a time frame. And then setting goals and specifically KPIs, right? That you can measure the performance and show your progress. Keep the internal track on team with KPIs, but I think another one to signal progress and also ensure accountability. We see lots of examples where a good strategy or outcome is planned, but especially if managers or line managers in charge of implementing that don't have KPIs in their performance review or in their annual targets, we really see that progress can stall. So setting those actual KPIs and targets is really, really critical. I think a lot of you probably are familiar with this as well, like you see on the bottom, setting SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Make sure you're looking at the country context and where you operate, looking at the global company goals or the local goals you might have if you're a multinational. Think about the impacts of products, services, and operations on women. So you're not just looking at your women in the office, but also potentially thinking of in your suppliers, among your suppliers, or also in the communities or buying your products and services, or seeing your advertising. All of that can have an impact. Think also of areas of opportunity where you can use scale and footprint to advance women's empowerment, and create opportunity for clear goal achievement. Okay, implementing within the business. I think this one is also really critical to think through. Activating and integrating new policies and procedures, right? That buy-in from senior management is absolutely crucial. We really see, right, without buy-in from the top and that kind of direction from leadership, that initiatives won't last, and they won't really be infused throughout the organization. But also ensuring you have a dedicated team. And I think that there's also buy-in and accountability with managers, because that is another kind of not a bottleneck, but I think it's a risk we see that when we have strong leadership commitments, but it's not really institutionalized in management and across teams. If the leader leaves, the whole process can kind of come to a halt. Communication is really, really, really important at multiple stages. Having sensitization sessions, potentially having multiple webinars or training sessions as a new policy or practice is rolled out is really critical, and continuing to update. And then having that M&E or tracking plan, also really critical. Okay, what I want to do, I'll also just use about 5 minutes, because I know not everyone has taken the GAT and really been able to develop their action plan. But in thinking of how you develop a holistic approach to specific issues that you want to address, I have these questions in everyone's worksheet as well. If you want to pick one specific issue that you want to work on, could be from your GAT results or could also be something you know, maybe that you're here to address in the webinar today. And I've outlined a few different questions to think of. So, looking at the priority issues, think of the severity and prioritize the areas of action you want to take. Thinking of the ultimate results or KPI. Think potentially of the time frame that you would implement the action and be able to achieve the result. Which members of senior management your activities would need support from. How would you get their buy-in? Thinking through how would you run your activities, any potential barriers to implementation. How would you communicate about your initiative internally and externally? And then also thinking of your time frame, how regularly would you hold check-ins with your core team? So I'll just take about 5 minutes for you to think through and run through these questions. And I hope we have a few to kind of share feedback after. But I'll also just put the link in the chat again that Safia shared to be able to access the worksheet if you want. So again, should be able to do this without thinking of the GAT. Without having your GAT results, but thinking of that one key issue. I'll leave these questions up on the slides, but you also have these in your worksheets. Any questions on this? I'll check the... Okay. Okay, I'll give you about 5 minutes to think through that, and then hopefully we have a little bit of feedback before we go to the next segment. Okay, maybe 2 more minutes and then I'll ask for some volunteers. Okay. I hope everyone had a little bit of a chance to think through this. Would anybody like to volunteer and share a bit of what they thought of? Okay, Mariam?
Okay, so I am audible to everyone?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so hi, Amy, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so this is Mariam. I'm from Liberty Miss Limited, and I really appreciate the work UN Women is doing and the Pakistan Business Council is doing as SERV and Safia and the team. So, what is our holistic approach as an organization regarding all the questions that you have mentioned is that we operate for, having the women in the organization in a CFT formation.
Hmm.
Likewise, I am a manager manufacturing and I'm acting as a DEI lead also. So we have different members that they have certain positions in the organizations, and in a CFT role, they are performing their DEI activities depending upon their passion and the people certainty they have and the approach they lead. So we have divided the roles in the CFT formation and run our activities accordingly. So this is our holistic approach that how we target, how we implement, and how we set in the KPIs of having the DNI is not just as a social cause but as a business case and having
Hmm.
more women. And as a result of this, we have grow from 12% to 26% in the female workforce from past 5 years in the organization.
Hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so this is my kind of story.
And Miriam, how did you go about getting leadership buy-in, ensuring that, you had accountability across teams to really achieve this?
Yeah, so it all comes from heart-to-heart conversations and heart-to-heart dealings, and how you are approaching your programs and your projects, and what mindset you are bringing into the organization. And for developing the mindset, we have arranged several trainings with the
Hmm.
with the SERV, with Pakistan Business Council, with other organizations also, and we have embedded that into our culture that we need to do this and we really need to do this, and that supports us, and we have seen the devastating changes, and you can say very we have seen the blind spots and we work on them, and now we are growing in a very certain way, subtle way, stability, and everything is on perfect, and we have scored GAT as 89%. So that
Hmm.
shows the accountability also.
Okay, great. Fabulous. Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share or also ask questions or anything? Okay. 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 Great. Okay. I'll keep us moving, but I hope you've all had kind of a chance to think about that and identify some key issues that you would be working on. Um, as we move towards looking at the action planning tool, and I haven't saved a ton of time for us to do that. I'll walk you through it and show you how it works, but it is something where you would need to bring actual numeric data into it. So it is something that you would probably do later offline with your teams. So the M&E framework, I'm going to show you this first and the action planning tool after, because the action planning tool uses all of this. So in 2021, at the regional level, we developed, it's the WEPs Transparency and Accountability, or the M&E framework. So this is all developed and aligned with the gender gap analysis tool. And just to reiterate, that tool was really developed by doing a very comprehensive benchmarking against global reporting initiatives, indexes, also looking at, mandated disclosures and sustainability reports. So the GAT is really kind of like a benchmarked tool that we have. And then we developed this transparency and accountability framework to basically measure progress towards implementing the 7 WEPs and then promoting gender equality. So this whole framework, it's got about 65, 63 indicators total. It covers all 7 WEPs. It's qualitative and quantitative indicators. It applies to all sectors. And just to say again as well, the framework aligns with existing reporting initiatives and then different benchmarks. And also you'll find in here the key metrics that you see in any ESG reports or kind of mandated disclosures. I'm going to also make sure I share the link with you all if you want to see the full framework. Let me just get that quickly. But I'll walk you through how it works. Okay, I'll put this in the chat. So it's a very comprehensive document. It does get a little bit technical, and I'm going to show you some of the key indicators that we use. So the way that we framed this is with different levels. So there's essential reporting indicators, complementary indicators, and then input and support measures and indicators. There are 8 essential reporting indicators. These are the indicators that every company should be already tracking or able to capture data on. Every company, no matter how small or large. These are also the 8 essential indicators that have been most, that are, show, how am I phrasing it? Okay, I'll phrase it in a different way. These are the ones that most show your status on gender equality. These 8 indicators, while they do touch mostly on leadership and workplace areas, they don't necessarily go deeper. They give you a very strong indication of where your company stands overall. And these are indicators that we're using for all WEP signatories to potentially report on. So we have about 11,000 companies globally that have signed the WEPs. And these are those indicators that we encourage everyone to report on. Complementary reporting indicators are more those that look at systemic barriers to gender equality. They're not necessarily the key outcomes we see. They go a little bit more into the workplace, but then also into the marketplace, looking at supplier diversity and procurement, looking at marketing and advertising. Also looking at community level work and then how you're interacting and engaging with the community. So a little bit deeper down in the value chain. And then we have a whole chunk of indicators that we call input and support measures. These are almost like activity indicators that you can do. And these have also been carefully curated as those that show strength in leading to those ultimate outcomes. So just to show you what this looks like, this is actually missing one indicator, sorry, at the top. There should also be percentage of women overall as employees. So those who are WEP signatories, when you join the WEPs, you have to report on 3 indicators. So these would also already be included in your WEPs application. But the essential covers a few different areas. So it's women in leadership, looking at senior leadership and board positions, Equal pay is also a key indicator. The ratio of basic salary for each employee category by significant location of operation. So it's not just the overall average, but looking at employee category as well. In the workplace, we look at percentage of new hires who are women, percentage of promoted employees who are women, and then really critically is retention rate of employees that took parental leave. We know so many women don't advance in the workplace because they don't fully return or they don't stay after taking maternity leave in particular. And then the final one of the essential indicators is on safe workplaces. So it's really has a confidential, anonymous grievance resolution and non-retaliation mechanism and procedures to address and respond to any incidents or reports of violence and harassment. So this isn't necessarily the outcome indicator. It's more of a yes, no. But the reason we chose this is because it often doesn't give you the full picture if you report absolute numbers of sexual harassment incidents, because often when you have more mechanisms in place, reporting actually goes up. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing if you have no reports. The complementary reporting indicators go a little bit more into the workplace. So women in traditionally underrepresented roles, hours of training that men and women have. And then it also looks at procurement. So supplier diversity, procurement spent on women-owned businesses. It looks at gender responsive marketing, also product design and development, and then down into women in communities. So these are 14. The full framework has about 63, 65, as I said. But this is a framework that you can use at any time to report on. As you report, and I'm also going to show you what it looks like on the website. We encourage companies to report every year. So providing data for the last fiscal year, ensuring that you're covering 80% of the employees. And then where possible, looking at further disaggregating to look at age, race or ethnicity, nationality, disability, and or sexual orientation. This is if you're using the framework offline, but for those also who want to actually report online, I'll show you what this looks like on the website. So if you are a WEP signatory, I'll take you to the website. Okay, so when you're on the homepage of the WEPs.org, you can go to companies and look up progress reports. So there's 486 companies. These are companies that have chosen to publicly report on some of those essential indicators. Let me just see right now how many we have from Pakistan. Okay, we have 10 from Pakistan. I'll just pick one here, maybe Bank Al Falah. So on WEPs.org, you can choose to report progress publicly, and it's up to you how many indicators you report or don't, and you can also include your annual reports. So anytime you become a signatory, you have a CEO photo and a quote, some general information about the company, and then you can choose how much you report or not. One of the things we encourage companies to do is report even if it's privately. So I'll show you what this looks like. I have kind of a mock account. So you would actually have here, if you click my account when you're logged in, my company is Alpha, my sample company. So you would actually see the name of your company here. You can edit the profile page. You can take the gender responsive procurement assessment tool. That's another tool that we have. Or you can start reporting. So you would click that. And then in the back end, this is what it looks like when you fill in your application or you edit your company profile. So essentially share your progress. This is reporting. For any of these indicators, what you can choose is to keep it private or public. When you make it private, we don't see the exact figure. The WEP secretariat who looks at the back end only sees the aggregate data. We only see that a company from Pakistan this size reported on this indicator, but we don't see the actual number. If you choose to make it public, then it actually appears on the company profile. And you can do this for all of the indicators. You can choose to share any that you want public or any that you want to keep private. If there's only one that you want to make public, that's fine. It's totally up to you. So this is kind of the function on the back end where you input all this data, and then you can also upload your annual reports if you have them. Any questions on that, on the reporting, before we move on? Okay. It's a great function, though, to be able to actually keep track of your progress on WEPs.org if you're a signatory. And I encourage, everybody to look at, I'll just drag it onto my screen, the full transparency and accountability framework. If you also want to take a look at the methodology and how we've developed the different indicators or also the definitions, you can access that in our digital library. Okay, so moving from framework to action planning. So we've gone a little bit over thinking of the different ways you can look at your issues, look at the systems kind of behind that, thinking through how you want to develop an action plan each year. So this is a good question that came up. It is not mandatory to report as a signatory, actually. It's fully voluntary. So reporting is totally voluntary, and how often you report is also up to you. We do encourage you to update and report each year, but it's not mandatory, just to answer the question. Great. Okay, great. So if you are ready to take the next step and actually go into utilizing our action planning tool, I'll show you a few slides of how it works, and then I'll actually show you an example Excel that has some kind of fake results in it so you can see. Okay. So the action planning tool allows you to do a high-level assessment of efforts, prioritize areas for action, and develop that overall kind of targeted plan. So right now it's an Excel-based tool where you would actually collect and input data. It helps give you concise and clear results. It also gives you recommended actions. And then again, this aligns with the GATT and with the WEPs M&E framework. And there's several different sheets that are included. I'll show you these slides, and then we'll go there together. Oh, I'll have to open it again on my computer. I had closed it. Okay, so step one is actually collecting the data. Okay, just so I have this open for myself. Okay, step one is actually collecting the data. So these would actually be numeric indicators. The GATT is giving you more of that yes, no, but then this would actually be the, your actual numbers, right? Percentage of women in leadership or percentage of employees. You can also choose upfront if you want to report on essential indicators or complementary indicators. This will kind of come down, it will link to the other sheets. It's kind of a smart Excel. There's an optional space to put in results per questions from the GATT, because that GATT will also give you the results that you've used there. You can use numbers, rates, or ratios, and there's also definitions and calculation methodologies, and you can also refer to the PDF document, the actual framework for that. The second step, the sheets link. So you put in the data collection, and then you can actually access the findings in the results tab. It will already populate that for you. Where relevant, global results are shown to help you benchmark. And then for each indicator, you get a score of beginning, improver, achiever, and leader. So it helps you identify the areas where you most need to take action. And then for each of the indicators, you can select whether you want to include it in the next step, which is in the action plan. You just tick the box in the right-hand column if you do or don't want to include it. And then the next step is really developing the action plan. So all those that you choose will show up in the next tab for the action plan. And from there, you need to identify measures and corresponding KPIs to implement it. We also do give you a list of recommended actions per indicator. So you can also see, based on where I am now in my progress, what are some steps I could actually be taking for recommended actions. Once you've decided on the measures and the KPIs, then you can add in a timeline for implementation. Short, medium, or long term, you can add in your baseline, and then it will also help you populate based on your selection. Finally, identifying who will be accountable for each of these in the owner tab. And you could always have primary owner and then list secondary if you know that multiple teams need to be involved. So it looks like this, and then you've got recommended actions. I think, yeah, I'll go ahead and just take you to the actual Excel. Okay, so let me make this full screen. Okay. This is has some mock results in it, and I think all of you should have this in your individual folders, or you should have been emailed it, a copy of it. And again, it's not something we would do together live today, but I'll walk you through it a little bit. And if you do want a deeper session of how to use it, we can always help you do that, because it is a pretty smart tool. So it gives you the instructions on the first page, very similar to what we just looked at. When you go to the overview, it gives you the essential indicators, complementary. It's just giving you another overview of indicators. Okay, data collection. This is where, for all these different areas, like women in leadership, it would actually ask you to input the numbers. And then this we can check if we also want to report on complementary indicators, or we can uncheck it and they won't be included in the next tab. But basically here it would ask me women in senior leadership, women on boards. These for the GAT are optional, right? For each of the GAT questions, you will actually get a score. So for question 1, my score was 10. For question 2, my score was 55. But really the more important thing are just the actual numeric values. So women in leadership, and then looking at equal pay, for example, this you would actually have to calculate the specific ratios, looking at executive, non-executive, and the different locations. Similarly here, equal opportunities in the workplace, looking at percentage of new hires, percentage of employees promoted. So again, these are those kind of essential indicators. And because I've also added in complementary indicators, it's giving me the rest of these areas as well to input my data. Okay, when I go to results, it automatically, for each question, has populated this. So I can see for all these different areas. So for women in leadership, I currently have an improver score. It's showing me my percentage, and then it's also showing me the global average. Yes, I'll definitely share the presentation, Asma, and I can also be contacted if you have any specific questions on the action planning tool, but I'll share the presentation for sure. You can also see, here where you stand. And then again, when we look to developing our action plan checklist, whatever you check here appears in the next tab. So if it's not an area I want to work on, maybe I want to work on women in leadership, but I'm not, this is high for equal pay, right? These are just mock results, but maybe equal pay is not an area, we're ready to work on in my company. So I don't check this, right? Whatever you check is whatever actually gets included in the next area. So again here, equal opportunities in the workplace, my overall score is beginner based on the actual values that I put in. Okay, so it basically does this for all the rest of the indicators. And then when I move to the action planning tab, okay, great. Yeah. Safia, maybe we can, and Osama, we can definitely share it again for sure, to make sure that everyone has a copy. So now when I go to the action planning tab, I've only got the ones that I ticked. So for example, in results, I only said I wanted to include women in leadership for now. So that's the only one that goes into my action plan. And what it gives me, right? These are my current outcomes. I'm an improver. This is where you actually input your own measures, right? So set up a dashboard. You know, so many different ways you could tackle this issue, right? Focus group discussions or surveys or mentorship or training, many different things you can do. You can set up your baseline KPI, your ultimate target KPI. I need to relook again at obviously the years in here for setting the deadlines and the automation, but you would choose whether you want to do short-term, medium, long-term, and then also indicate who the owner is and the other team members that you would be working on this with. When you're looking at these specific areas, and you'll see in the next tab, and you also have it linked here, is check recommended actions. So this is also really great for each of these indicators, whether you're a beginner, improver, or achiever leader. Oops. Sorry, it's actually going to link you to a resource on weps.org, which is another really nice thing it does. But it's going to actually give you recommended actions, right? And the KPIs that you could use, and then links to further resources. So it's also just a really great tool to look at based on where we stand today. What else could we be doing? What are some actual actions that would be recommended based on global best practices that we could be doing? There's a brief fact sheet with some of the regional averages and global figures. These do need to be updated, I will say, because we haven't rolled this out publicly, so we haven't updated all of the figures. And then you do also have one final sheet that gives you the full WEPs indicators list. So this is where you see we have about 67 here. This is that full list of all the indicators we have, and then also the definitions of how we would define them. So it's quite a smart tool. It's not allowing you as much of the nuance in thinking through that strategy as the steps we took before. So I think it would be really important, as you think what is underneath some of those measures, or thinking through how do I get leadership buy-in? How do I really ensure communication? And that could still be laid out here within the action plan, but you still probably will need some qualitative discussions to go with a tool like this as well. But it can be a really great way to ensure that you're moving from the GAT tool, into the action planning tool. You're aligned with all of our kind of transparency and accountability indicators, which again are fully aligned to kind of global best practices. To also help you structure what you do. And then it's also something you can come back to as you want to look at your results again and see the areas that you might actually want to include in your action plan moving forward. Maybe you're not ready to look at them today, but you can moving forward. And also maybe just to go back for a second, it jumped to one of these resources. WEPs.org is a whole host of different resources. We have hundreds and hundreds of resources that have been uploaded. Everything from brochures to policy guidance to best practice case studies. There really, at webinars that we've also held, there really is a lot of resources to support you in also implementing this action plan and this journey. Okay. I know, like I said, we won't have time to go through this today, but does anyone have specific questions that they want to ask about this? Because yeah, it does require you to capture the actual numeric data, right, that you might want to input. But it can be also just a really powerful tool to show where you stand and help you take the next step. And again, you're covering all those different areas across the value chain. Yes, so I think, like we've said a few times, everybody should have received an email of the action planning tool earlier, and we'll also share it with everyone. It's not public, but I think for everyone who joined the webinar, we're happy to have you pilot test it for us, give us any feedback, and also ask if you have any other specific questions around it. Yeah, we really look across the value chain. And I think that's really, I'll just say that last thing too before I open for any other questions. I think that's really one of the core value adds of the WEPs is that you're looking at every different way and area that you may be impacting gender equality, right? From the board to what you market, to how you design your products, right? How you seek talent and do your job advertisements, how you recruit and hire, who you also form partnerships with potentially, right, to advance different areas. Maybe you partner with an education institution in STEM to try and, longer down the road, build the pipeline for more women to enter engineering roles so that you do have more, talent in the market. There can really be a number of different ways. Okay, so with that, any questions on utilizing the tool, the framework, the GAT tool? We have 5 minutes left, so please describe, okay, someone's asking, please describe more about the headers, women in communities. Okay. This one, so let me look at the full indicators list. So this is looking not just at women in the communities where you operate, but also how you're impacting different communities. So one of these is potentially percentage of financial or pro bono support for gender equality programs. This could even be a CSR program or something that you run in the local community. Maybe you even support an NGO or a local women's group. Applying a gender lens to community relations. Let me just go to the full list also, because I think there's a few different ways that it actually blends into community. Okay. A few different ways you can look at community. So one, this could be percentage of beneficiaries from community projects. So maybe you also have a project looking at clean water systems or clean systems in the communities where you operate, and you're tracking how many women have actually been beneficiaries. This could be community programs you run assessed using gender-related criteria, whether they're programs to minimize, mitigate, or compensate for adverse social or economic impacts. So some of this, if you're coming from a large company and you're conducting human rights due diligence before you undertake activities, that would also come into this. It could be a policy or commitment that addresses gender in CSR, philanthropy, public advocacy. So this can also link to kind of community in the wider sense of kind of alliances, partnerships, broader level advocacy that you might even do within Pakistan, for example. Here is gender responsive human rights due diligence to identify specific gender related tasks if you're undertaking human rights due diligence. And then I think as well, when we looked into the data collection, looking at potentially philanthropy, advocacy, and partnerships. So it covers quite a few different areas under that aspect of women in communities, but several different indicators. We also think of, even though, so this is WEP Principle 6, even though it is kind of women in communities, this is also where we look at a lot of the advocacy related work or joining industry alliances or business associations, or also taking part in programs like this with PVC that are part of that broader community of advocates and potential partners. This could also be something, it's not in the indicator list, but also a community initiative could be forming a partnership with an NGO to undertake some research. For example, maybe research relevant to your industry and you're trying to address a specific question about women in the industry. This also falls under a lot of that Principle 6 community level work. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, I know it's been a lot of input and content. But you can contact me. Safia will share my email if you have any other specific questions. I'll share a copy of the slides, and also you'll all have a copy of the action planning tool if you want to actually test it out and use it. Whether or not you're a WEP signatory, a lot of the materials will be available on weps.org for you to use. And the GAT tool is available free of use for anyone to use if you haven't done it yet and you also want to get started there. But I'll hand it back to Safia. But thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you everyone for being so active. I was getting messages throughout on both my chat and my phone for access to the Excel sheet and for access to various slides. So don't worry, as soon as Amy shares them with me, I'll share them with you. I'll also add Amy to the email that I'm going to share with all of you, so you have her email and her details, just to make it easier for all of you to be connected with the UN Women team. Thank you for joining us and for being so active. We really appreciate the participation and the efforts you're making towards gender equality in your own companies. Fariha, Fatma, would you like to add anything before we close?
Thank you very much, Safia, for taking it along, and we are thankful to PBC as well for sharing this platform to advocate gender equality through WEPs. And I think we will continue to work with you in future as well.
Thank you so much, Fariha. We
And
really
thank you, Amy.
appreciate
It
our
was very
partnership.
useful. Thank
Thank
you, Amy.
you.
It was very useful.
Thanks. Thanks so much, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a really nice day, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.